Hi everyone, it's Yvette from Letslace. In this video I will explain what a catch pin is and show you how to use it when making buck's point lace. This diagram shows how the buck's point ground is linked to the foot side on the left hand side of the motif. It shows you what buck's point lace looks like if a catch pin is used to provide support when you link the ground to the foot side. Notice the series of loops that is so characteristic of the buck's point foot side. But what is a catch pin and why is it necessary to use a catch pin when making buck's point lace? In my experience, this is probably the thing that causes the most confusion for lace makers when they start making buck's point lace. And many lace makers want to give up at this point because they just find it too frustrating to work out how and why they need to use a catch pin. But once you understand why you need to use a catch pin, you'll realize soon enough that it's not hard at all. So let's demystify the catch pin once and for all. Notice the direction in which the threads travel. Look at what happens to the red thread as the worker pair works through the passive pairs from left to right to join the ground and is then used to make a buck's point ground stitch by working a half stitch and then twisting both pairs twice. Because there is an uneven number of twists, that being 3 twists, it results in the red thread making a U-turn without being anchored or supported by the pin that is typically put up between the pairs when you make a buck's point ground stitch. After making a U-turn, the red thread then ends up working back through the passive pairs on the left-hand side of the motif. When you tension the red thread that has just made the U-turn and worked back through the passive pairs on the left-hand side, you'll see that it pulls the work. That's because the red thread is not supported by a pin, so there's nothing to anchor it and keep it in place when you tension it. So you'll end up with a very unsightly line made up of the 2 black threads rather than the loops characteristic of buck's point as illustrated in the previous diagram. To prevent this from happening, you need to use a catch pin. So when you work the buck's point ground stitch directly next to the passive pairs, you don't place a pin between the 2 pairs used to work the buck's point ground stitch as you would normally do. Instead, you place the pin beside the 2 pairs that made the buck's point ground stitch. So you place the pin between the buck's point ground stitch and the passive pairs on the left-hand side of the motif. This means that the red thread will have to travel around the pin before it makes a U-turn, which means it will be anchored and kept in place when you tension it. And this is how you do it in practice. I've worked a row of buck's point ground stitches from the right hand side up to the second last pinhole before the passive pairs on the left hand side of the lace. Now I set aside the right hand pair and then I use the left hand pair to work the last buck's point ground stitch before the passive pairs. Work a half stitch and then put 2 twists on each pair. Normally you would put up a pin between these 2 pairs, but because this is the last buck's point ground stitch before the passive pairs, you need to use a catch pin instead. So you place the pin beside the 2 pairs that made the buck's point ground stitch so that it is between the buck's point ground stitch and the passive pairs on the left hand side of the motif. And then you take the left hand pair and work back through the passive pairs to make a picot on the left hand side. If you tension this pair, the catch pin anchors the thread. That brings us to the end of this video. To see more videos demonstrating bobbin lace techniques, please subscribe to Letslace's YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.